Welcome to Legends at Midnight, where legends breathe in silence. Tonight's tale is Hades and the Underworld, Rivers of Death, Persephone myth. If you've already subscribed and left a like, let's begin. In the deepest reaches of the earth, where sunlight has never touched and shadows hold dominion over all that exists, lies a realm both feared and revered by mortals and gods alike. This is the Underworld, the kingdom of the dead, where souls journey after their earthly forms have returned to dust. Here, in this vast and mysterious domain, rules Hades, lord of the shadows, keeper of the departed, and sovereign of a realm that exists beyond the boundaries of time and mortal understanding. The entrance to this otherworldly domain is not marked by grand gates or towering monuments, but rather by a subtle shift in the very fabric of reality itself. The air grows heavy with the weight of countless centuries, and the ground beneath one's feet begins to slope downward into darkness that seems to swallow light itself. Ancient trees with gnarled branches reach upward like desperate fingers, their leaves having long since turned to ash and dust, yet somehow still clinging to their skeletal frames. As one descends deeper into this realm, the familiar sounds of the living world fade away, replaced by a profound silence that speaks volumes about the nature of this place. It is not the silence of emptiness, but rather the silence of patience, of waiting, of countless souls who have found their eternal rest in this domain beyond the reach of mortal concerns. The very air seems to whisper with the memories of all who have passed this way before, carrying with it the faintest echoes of lives once lived, loves once cherished, and dreams once pursued. The geography of the underworld is as complex and varied as the mortal realm above, yet shaped by forces and purposes entirely different from those that govern the land of the living. Vast plains stretch endlessly under a sky that knows neither sun nor moon, illuminated instead by a soft, ethereal glow that seems to emanate from the very ground itself. Mountains rise like ancient sentinels, their peaks shrouded in mists that swirl with the essence of forgotten ages, while deep valleys cradle rivers that flow with waters unlike any found in the world above. It is these rivers that serve as the arteries of the underworld, carrying with them not merely water, but the very essence of death itself, each one possessing its own unique properties and purpose in the grand design of this realm. 5 great rivers wind their way through the landscape of the dead, each one a boundary and a passage, a barrier and a bridge between different aspects of the afterlife experience. The first and perhaps most famous of these waterways is the river Styx, whose dark waters serve as the primary boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The Styx flows with a current that seems to move of its own accord, its surface reflecting not the sky above, but rather the depths of eternity itself. The water appears almost black in the dim light of the underworld, yet when observed closely, one can see that it possesses a depth that seems to contain all colors and no color simultaneously. Along the banks of the Styx stands Acheron, the ancient ferryman whose duty it has been since time immemorial to transport the souls of the dead across these sacred waters. Acheron is a figure both humble and magnificent, his appearance weathered by countless ages of service, yet possessing a dignity that speaks to the profound importance of his role in the cosmic order. His boat, carved from wood that has never known decay, moves silently across the waters, guided by his steady hand and unwavering dedication to his eternal task. The crossing of the Styx is a moment of profound transformation for every soul that makes this journey. As the boat glides across the dark waters, the last connections to mortal life begin to fade, and the soul begins to adapt to its new existence in the realm of the dead. The journey is not long in terms of distance, yet it encompasses a transition that is infinite in its significance, marking the final step in the soul's passage from one state of being to another. Beyond the Styx lies the river Acheron, known as the River of Woe, whose waters carry within them all the sorrows that have ever been felt by mortal hearts. The Acheron flows with a gentle current that belies the intensity of emotion contained within its depths. Its waters are clearer than those of the Styx, yet they possess a quality that seems to draw the observer into contemplation of all the sadness and loss that characterizes the mortal experience. The banks of the Acheron are lined with weeping willows whose branches trail in the water, their leaves rustling with sounds that echo the sighs and laments of countless souls who have passed this way. These trees serve as silent witnesses to the grief that flows through this river, their presence a reminder that sorrow, while painful, is also a testament to the depth of love and connection that makes mortal existence meaningful. Souls who encounter the Acheron often find themselves overwhelmed by the weight of all the sadness they have carried during their earthly lives. Yet this experience, rather than being merely painful, serves a crucial purpose in their journey toward acceptance and peace. By confronting and acknowledging their sorrows, souls begin the process of releasing the emotional burdens that might otherwise anchor them to their past existence, preventing them from fully embracing their new state of being. The third great river is Cocytus, the river of lamentation, whose waters are formed from the tears of all who have ever grieved. This river flows with a sound that is unmistakably that of weeping, a constant, gentle sobbing that rises from the water itself and fills the air with its mournful song. The Cocytus serves as a place where souls can give full expression to their grief, where the tears that were held back in life can finally be released without shame or restraint. The shores of the Cocytus are soft and yielding, formed from earth that has been moistened by countless tears throughout the ages. Strange flowers grow along these banks, their petals translucent and delicate, colored in shades of silver and pale blue that seem to capture and reflect the essence of grief itself. These flowers bloom eternally, never wilting or fading, their beauty a testament to the idea that even sorrow can be transformed into something of profound meaning and grace. Many souls spend considerable time beside the Cocytus, allowing themselves to fully experience and process the grief that accompanies their transition from life to death. This is not a punishment, but rather a necessary healing process, a chance to honor the pain of loss while gradually learning to let go of the attachments that no longer serve them in their new existence. The fourth river, Phlegethon, presents a stark contrast to the gentle sorrow of the Cocytus. This is the river of fire, whose waters burn with flames that never consume yet always purify. The Phlegethon flows like liquid fire, its surface dancing with flames of every color imaginable, from deep crimson to brilliant gold, from intense blue to pure white heat that seems to burn away all impurities from whatever it touches. The purpose of the Phlegethon is not to torment or punish, but rather to cleanse and purify souls of the anger, hatred, and destructive emotions that they may have carried with them from their mortal existence. The fire of this river burns away the dross of negative emotion, leaving behind only the pure essence of the soul, freed from the corrupting influences that may have accumulated during earthly life. Souls who bathe in the waters of the Phlegethon emerge transformed, their spiritual forms purified and refined by the sacred flames. The process is not without its challenges, as confronting and releasing deeply held anger and resentment requires great courage and determination. Yet those who complete this purification find themselves lighter, clearer, and more at peace with themselves and their circumstances. The fifth and final river is Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, whose waters possess the power to wash away memories and grant souls the gift of release from the past. The Lethe flows with waters that are crystal clear and perfectly still, reflecting nothing and revealing everything. To drink from these waters is to let go of all memories, both painful and pleasant, that might prevent a soul from fully embracing its new existence in the realm of the dead. The banks of the Lethe are lined with poppies, their red petals nodding gently in the soft breezes that blow through the underworld. These flowers have long been associated with sleep and forgetfulness, and their presence here serves as a gentle reminder of the peace that can come from releasing the burden of memory. The air around the Lethe is filled with a subtle fragrance that induces a sense of calm and tranquility, preparing souls for the profound transformation that awaits them. Not all souls choose to drink from the Lethe immediately upon encountering it. Many spend time contemplating their memories, weighing the pain of remembering against the peace of forgetting. This choice is deeply personal and is never forced upon any soul. Some find that they are not ready to release their memories, while others discover that they have been longing for this release without even realizing it. These 5 rivers serve as more than mere geographical features of the underworld. They represent the stages of emotional and spiritual processing that souls must navigate as they transition from life to death. Each river offers its own lessons and opportunities for growth, its own challenges and rewards. Together, they form a comprehensive system designed to help souls release the attachments and burdens of mortal existence, while preserving the essential core of their being. The realm through which these rivers flow is ruled by Hades, a god whose name has become synonymous with the underworld itself, yet whose true nature is far more complex and nuanced than many mortal tales suggest. Hades is not the cruel tyrant of popular imagination, but rather a just and compassionate ruler who takes his responsibilities seriously and treats all souls under his care with fairness and dignity. Hades appears as a figure of imposing presence, tall and dignified, with dark hair that seems to absorb light rather than reflecting it, and eyes that hold the depth of eternity itself. His clothing is elegant yet somber, befitting his role as Lord of the Dead, and he carries himself with the quiet confidence of one who has mastered the most challenging aspects of existence. Despite his awesome power, there is nothing cruel or vindictive in his demeanor. Rather, he possesses the calm authority of a judge who understands the weight of his decisions and the importance of treating each case with careful consideration. The Palace of Hades stands at the heart of the underworld, a magnificent structure built from stones that gleam with their own inner light. The architecture is both grand and welcoming, designed to inspire respect rather than fear. Great halls stretch endlessly, their ceilings supported by columns carved from single pieces of obsidian, while vast windows look out upon the landscapes of the afterlife. Gardens surround the palace, filled with flowers that bloom in the eternal twilight of the underworld, their beauty a testament to the idea that death need not mean the end of all loveliness. For countless ages, Hades ruled his domain alone, finding satisfaction in his work but experiencing a loneliness that even the companionship of the souls under his care could not entirely alleviate. He was respected by his subjects and feared by mortals, yet he longed for something more, something that would bring warmth and joy to the shadows of his realm. This longing would eventually lead to one of the most profound and transformative events in the history of both the mortal world and the underworld. Above, in the bright realm of the living, spring eternal reigned under the care of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, fertility, and all growing things. Demeter's power manifested in the endless cycle of planting and harvest, in the green shoots that pushed through the earth each spring, and in the golden grain that sustained mortal life. Her joy was found in the fertility of the earth and in the knowledge that her work brought sustenance and life to all living creatures. Demeter's most precious treasure was her daughter Persephone, a maiden of extraordinary beauty and grace whose very presence seemed to encourage flowers to bloom and birds to sing. Persephone possessed a natural affinity for all living things, able to coax blossoms from the most reluctant buds and to bring comfort to wounded creatures with her gentle touch. Her laughter was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze, and her beauty was not merely physical but seemed to radiate from her very soul, touching all who encountered her with its pure and joyful energy. Mother and daughter shared a bond that was profound and unbreakable, their love for each other reflected in the abundance and beauty of the natural world under their joint care. Demeter delighted in teaching Persephone the secrets of growing things, while Persephone brought to her mother's work a sense of wonder and joy that kept the world fresh and new. Together, they embodied the perfect harmony between the wisdom of experience and the enthusiasm of youth. Persephone spent her days wandering through meadows and forests, tending to flowers and communing with the creatures of the wild. She had a particular fondness for a meadow that bloomed with flowers of every description, a place where the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of the divine seemed particularly thin. It was here that she felt most at peace, surrounded by beauty and connected to the deep rhythms of natural life. On one fateful day, as Persephone wandered through her beloved meadow, she noticed a flower unlike any she had ever seen before. It was a narcissus of extraordinary beauty, its petals seeming to glow with their own inner light, and its fragrance more intoxicating than any flower she had encountered. Drawn by its beauty, she moved closer, reaching out to pluck this marvelous bloom and add it to the garland she was weaving. The moment her fingers touched the stem of the narcissus, the earth beneath her feet began to rumble and shake. The ground split open with a sound like thunder, revealing a chasm that seemed to descend into the very heart of the earth itself. From this opening rose a chariot drawn by black horses whose eyes burned like coals, their hooves striking sparks from the rocky ground as they emerged from the depths. The driver of this chariot was Hades himself, lord of the underworld, who had been watching Persephone from afar and had become enchanted by her beauty and grace. Unable to contain his longing any longer, he had decided to take action, creating the magical Narcissus as a means to draw her close enough for him to make his move. As his chariot reached the surface, he swept Persephone up into his arms, his action swift and decisive, leaving no time for resistance or escape. Persephone's cry of alarm echoed across the meadow, a sound of such anguish that it was heard by every living creature within miles. Birds fell silent in their trees, flowers drooped their heads in sympathy, and even the wind seemed to pause in its journey across the land. Yet despite the power of her voice and the urgency of her situation, there was no one near enough to come to her aid, no one who could prevent what was already set in motion. The chariot of Hades plunged back into the chasm from which it had emerged, carrying Persephone down into the depths of the earth at a speed that made the journey pass in mere moments. The opening in the ground sealed itself behind them, leaving no trace of what had occurred save for the lingering fragrance of the narcissus and the echo of Persephone's cry that seemed to hang in the air long after she had vanished from sight. The descent into the underworld was unlike anything Persephone had ever experienced. The world above grew distant and dim, while ahead of her opened a realm of shadows and mystery that was completely foreign to her experience. The darkness was not the familiar darkness of night, which she had always found comforting, but rather a different kind of absence of light that seemed to have its own presence and weight. As they crossed the river Styx, Persephone caught her first glimpse of the true nature of the realm to which she was being taken. The dark waters reflected no light, yet somehow she could see their depth and movement. Charon the ferryman watched their passage with his ancient eyes, recognizing the significance of this moment even as it unfolded. The souls waiting on the banks of the river turned to observe this unprecedented event, sensing that something of great importance was taking place. The palace of Hades rose before them like a mountain of living shadow, its towers reaching upward into the dim light of the underworld sky. As they approached, the gates opened silently, and Persephone found herself carried into halls that were vast beyond her imagination, filled with a beauty that was unlike anything in the world above yet no less magnificent for its difference. Hades brought the chariot to a stop in a great courtyard filled with gardens that bloomed in eternal twilight. Here, finally, he set Persephone gently upon the ground, his manner courteous despite the violence of his action in taking her from her home. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying with it the authority of his position yet also revealing something of the loneliness and longing that had driven him to this desperate act. He explained to Persephone that he had been watching her from afar, that her beauty and grace had captured his heart completely, and that he could no longer bear the loneliness of ruling his realm without a companion to share its burdens and its strange beauty. He acknowledged that his method of bringing her to his domain was wrong, yet he pleaded with her to understand the depth of his feelings and to consider the possibility that she might find happiness in his realm. Persephone listened to his words with a mixture of fear, anger, and confusion. She could not deny the obvious sincerity of his feelings, nor could she fail to recognize the majesty and strange beauty of his realm. Yet her heart ached for her mother, for the meadows and forests of her home, for the sunlight and the freedom she had always known. The underworld, no matter how magnificent, felt like a prison to one who had always lived in the light. Meanwhile, above in the world of the living, Demeter's anguish at the disappearance of her daughter began to manifest in ways that affected the entire mortal realm. The goddess of the harvest and growing things found herself unable to concentrate on her duties. Her divine power disrupted by her grief and worry. Crops began to wither in the fields, flowers lost their vibrant colors, and trees shed their leaves out of season as the natural world responded to its guardian's distress. Demeter searched everywhere for her daughter, traveling to every corner of the earth and beyond, questioning gods, mortals, and spirits alike. She neglected her duties entirely, allowing the world to slide toward barrenness and famine as she pursued her desperate quest. The other gods watched with growing concern as the realm of mortals began to suffer from the neglect of its primary source of abundance and fertility. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the world above ground began to take on an increasingly desolate appearance. The eternal spring that had characterized Demeter's realm came to an end, replaced by a harsh and unforgiving season that seemed to drain the life from everything it touched. Rivers ran low, wells dried up, and the very soil seemed to lose its power to nurture life. In the underworld, Persephone struggled to adapt to her new circumstances. Hades treated her with utmost respect and courtesy, providing her with everything she could possibly need for comfort and entertainment. The palace was vast enough that she could wander for days without retracing her steps, and the gardens offered beauty and tranquility that might have delighted her under other circumstances. Yet she remained homesick and sorrowful, unable to find joy in her surroundings no matter how magnificent they might be. Hades was patient with her grief, understanding that the transition from the bright world above to the shadowy realm below was not one that could be made easily or quickly. He did not press her for affection or companionship, but rather gave her space to process her situation while making it clear that he was available whenever she might want to talk or seek comfort. Gradually, despite her initial resistance, Persephone began to discover aspects of the underworld that intrigued and even fascinated her. The souls who dwelt there were not the tortured, miserable beings she had expected, but rather individuals who had found peace and purpose in their afterlife existence. Many of them approached her with curiosity and respect, eager to share stories of their mortal lives and to learn about the world above. She began to understand that the underworld was not a place of punishment or suffering, but rather a realm of rest and reflection where souls could process their earthly experiences and find resolution for the conflicts and challenges they had faced during their mortal existence. The rivers served not as barriers or obstacles, but as opportunities for healing and growth, each one offering its own form of spiritual cleansing and renewal. Hades himself proved to be far different from her initial impression of him. Beneath his awesome exterior lay a being of profound compassion and wisdom, one who took his responsibilities as ruler of the dead seriously, and who genuinely cared for the welfare of every soul under his protection. He was a fair and just judge, one who listened carefully to every case brought before him and who made his decisions based on wisdom and understanding rather than arbitrary power. As she spent more time in his company, Persephone began to see the loneliness that had driven Hades to his desperate act. For countless ages he had borne the weight of his responsibilities alone, finding satisfaction in his work but lacking the companionship that might have made his existence truly fulfilling. She began to understand that his actions, while wrong in their execution, had been born not of cruelty or selfishness but of a deep and genuine longing for connection and love. The gardens of the underworld became a particular source of fascination for Persephone. Here, in the eternal twilight of the realm of the dead, grew flowers and plants unlike any found in the world above. They possessed a beauty that was haunting and ethereal, their colors more subtle, yet somehow more profound than those of their earthly counterparts. These plants had adapted to thrive in the unique conditions of the underworld, drawing their sustenance not from sunlight, but from the spiritual energy that permeated the realm. Under Persephone's care, these gardens began to flourish as never before. Her natural affinity for growing things proved to be just as effective in the underworld as it had been in the world above, though the results were different in character. The flowers she tended took on new depths of beauty, while the trees produced fruits that nourished not the body but the soul itself. Hades watched this transformation with wonder and growing affection. Persephone brought to his realm something that had been missing since its creation. The touch of life and growth, the presence of someone who could see beauty in the shadows and who could nurture it into full expression. Her influence was felt throughout the underworld, as souls found themselves drawn to the gardens where they could experience a form of peace and renewal that had not been available to them before. Yet despite these positive developments, Persephone remained homesick for the world above and worried about her mother. She could sense, even from the depths of the underworld, that something was terribly wrong in the realm of the living. The spiritual connection between mother and daughter was too strong to be completely severed by physical separation, and Persephone found herself increasingly troubled by vague impressions of suffering and desolation that seemed to emanate from above. The situation reached a crisis point when word finally reached the underworld of the devastation that was occurring in the mortal realm. Hermes, messenger of the gods, arrived at the palace of Hades with news of the famine and barrenness that had spread across the earth as a result of Demeter's grief and neglect of her duties. The other gods, led by Zeus himself, were demanding that Hades release Persephone and return her to her mother before the entire mortal world perished from lack of sustenance. Hades received this message with a heavy heart, understanding that the situation had grown far beyond what he had anticipated when he first acted on his longing for companionship. He had not intended for his love for Persephone to result in suffering for countless innocent mortals, yet he could not deny that his actions had set in motion a chain of events that threatened the very foundations of the natural order. The debate that followed was intense and deeply personal. Hades genuinely loved Persephone and believed that she had begun to find happiness in his realm, yet he could not ignore the greater good or the suffering of the innocent. Persephone herself was torn between her growing affection for Hades and her love for her mother and the world above. She had indeed found aspects of the underworld that she valued and appreciated, yet her heart still longed for the sunlight and the freedom of her former existence. The solution, when it finally emerged, came from Zeus himself, who proposed a compromise that would honor the legitimate claims of all parties involved. Persephone would be allowed to return to the world above and reunite with her mother, thus ending the devastation that was ravaging the mortal realm. However, because she had begun to make a life for herself in the underworld, and because Hades' claim to her affection was not entirely without merit, she would spend part of each year in the realm of the dead, serving as its queen and bringing to it the gifts of life and growth that she had already begun to share. This arrangement required careful negotiation and considerable compromise from all involved. Demeter was reluctant to accept any solution that would take her daughter away from her for any length of time, while Hades struggled with the idea of being separated from the one who had brought such joy and purpose to his existence. Persephone herself had to weigh her loyalties and desires, ultimately deciding that the compromise offered the best hope for bringing peace and harmony to all involved. The specifics of the arrangement were worked out with divine precision. Persephone would spend the spring and summer months in the world above, helping her mother tend to the growing things and ensuring that the mortal realm received the care and attention it needed to flourish. During these months, her presence would inspire the earth to burst forth with new life. Flowers would bloom in abundance, and crops would grow strong and healthy under her loving care. When autumn arrived, Persephone would return to the underworld, where she would spend the winter months as queen of the realm of the dead. During this time, the world above would rest and recover from the intensity of the growing season, while Persephone would bring her gifts of life and renewal to the souls who dwelt in the shadows. Her presence would transform the underworld from a place of mere existence into a realm of active growth and positive change. This arrangement had profound implications for both realms. In the world above, it created the cycle of seasons that had not existed before, with spring and summer representing times of growth and abundance, while autumn and winter became periods of rest and reflection. This rhythm gave new depth and meaning to mortal existence, creating natural cycles that reflected the deeper patterns of life, death, and renewal. In the underworld, Persephone's periodic presence brought changes that were equally significant. The gardens flourished under her care, becoming places of such beauty that souls would journey from across the realm just to experience their tranquil splendor. Her influence extended to the rivers as well, whose waters seemed to flow with greater healing power when she was present to bless them. The first return of Persephone to the world above was a moment of incredible joy and celebration. Demeter's reunion with her daughter was marked by an explosion of growth and fertility that surpassed anything the world had ever seen. Flowers bloomed in impossible profusion, trees bore fruit in abundance, and the very air seemed to sparkle with the energy of life renewed. The famine that had threatened to destroy the mortal realm came to an immediate end, replaced by an abundance that spoke to the profound power of love and reunion. Yet this joy was tempered by the knowledge that the separation would come again. As the months passed and autumn approached, both mother and daughter felt the approaching sadness of their coming parting. Demeter struggled to accept that she would have to let her daughter go, while Persephone found herself caught between her love for her mother and her growing sense of responsibility toward the underworld and its inhabitants. The first departure was perhaps the most difficult, as it established the pattern that would be repeated year after year for all time to come. As Persephone prepared to return to the underworld, the world above began to reflect the sadness of the separation. Leaves changed color and fell from the trees, flowers withered and died, and a chill entered the air that spoke of the approaching winter. This was not the devastating barrenness that had occurred during Demeter's initial grief, but rather a natural and necessary period of rest and dormancy. When Persephone arrived back in the underworld, she was greeted with great joy by Hades, and by the souls who had come to love and respect her during her previous stay. The palace had been prepared for her return with decorations and celebrations that rivaled anything in the world above. The gardens, which had maintained their beauty even in her absence, seemed to brighten and flourish with renewed vigor at her presence. As queen of the underworld, Persephone took on responsibilities that went far beyond the care of gardens and flowers. She became an advocate for the souls under her care, working to ensure that each one received fair treatment and the opportunity for growth and healing. Her natural compassion and wisdom made her an ideal intermediary between the souls and Hades, helping to resolve conflicts and address concerns that might not have come to the attention of the Lord of the Dead. The relationship between Hades and Persephone continued to evolve and deepen as the cycles of separation and reunion repeated year after year. What had begun as an act of desperate longing gradually transformed into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and growing love. Persephone came to appreciate Hades' dedication to his duties and his genuine care for the souls under his protection, while Hades found in Persephone not only a beloved companion, but also a wise counselor whose insights enhanced his ability to rule justly and compassionately. The seasonal cycle that resulted from this arrangement became one of the fundamental rhythms of existence in the mortal world. Spring came to represent hope, renewal, and the triumph of life over the dormancy of winter. Summer embodied the full flowering of life's potential, a time of abundance and growth when the world displayed its beauty in full measure. Autumn became a season of harvest and reflection, when mortals gathered the fruits of their labor and prepared for the introspective time of winter. Winter itself was transformed from a time of mere hardship into a period of rest and renewal, when the world gathered its strength for the renewal that would come with spring. This cycle gave mortals a new understanding of their own lives and deaths. They began to see death not as an ending but as a transition, similar to the seasonal changes that they witnessed year after year. Just as winter gave way to spring, so too might death lead to new forms of existence and growth. The knowledge that Persephone served as queen of the underworld provided comfort to those who faced their own mortality, knowing that the realm of the dead was ruled by one who understood both life and death, growth and rest. The rivers of the underworld took on new significance in this context. Under Persephone's influence, they became less like barriers to be crossed and more like pathways to healing and understanding. The Styx remained the boundary between life and death, but its crossing came to be seen as the first step in a journey of spiritual growth, rather than merely the end of mortal existence. The Acheron continued to carry the sorrows of the world, but souls learned to see their grief as a necessary part of the healing process, rather than simply as suffering to be endured. The Cocytus still echoed with the sound of weeping, but the tears it carried were understood to be cleansing and purifying, washing away the pain of loss while honoring the love that had made such pain possible. The Phlegethon burned with its eternal flames, but souls learned to welcome its purifying fire as a means of releasing the anger and resentment that might otherwise prevent them from finding peace. The Lethe continued to offer the gift of forgetfulness, but souls approached its waters with greater wisdom, understanding that choosing to forget was not about denial, but about choosing to focus on growth and renewal rather than being trapped by past pain. Persephone's presence in the underworld also brought about changes in the physical environment of the realm. The gardens expanded and diversified, offering souls new opportunities for contemplation and healing. Groves of trees that had never existed before began to grow, their branches providing shade and shelter for those who needed rest. Meadows appeared where souls could gather to share their stories and support one another in their journey toward peace and understanding. The palace itself was transformed by Persephone's influence. Halls that had once been austere and formal became warmer and more welcoming, filled with flowers and decorations that made even the newest arrivals feel less intimidated by their surroundings. Windows were opened to provide better views of the gardens and landscapes, allowing natural light to brighten spaces that had previously relied entirely on artificial illumination. Perhaps most importantly, Persephone established traditions and rituals that helped souls process their transition from life to death more effectively. She created spaces for reflection and meditation, where souls could contemplate their earthly experiences and begin to understand how those experiences had shaped them. She instituted ceremonies that honored the lives that souls had lived, while also celebrating their new existence in the underworld. These innovations were not implemented without careful consideration of their impact on the existing order of the underworld. Hades had spent countless ages perfecting the systems and procedures that governed his realm, and any changes needed to be made in a way that preserved the essential justice and fairness that characterized his rule. Persephone worked closely with him to ensure that her additions and modifications enhanced rather than disrupted the fundamental purposes of the underworld. The collaboration between Hades and Persephone became a model for how different perspectives and approaches could be combined to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Hades brought to their partnership his vast experience, his deep understanding of justice and law, and his unwavering commitment to his responsibilities as ruler of the dead. Persephone contributed her natural compassion, her gift for nurturing growth and healing, and her fresh perspective on the needs and possibilities of the souls under their care. Together, they transformed the underworld from a place that souls endured into a realm where they could truly flourish and find fulfillment. The changes they implemented were not merely cosmetic or superficial, but rather represented a fundamental shift in the purpose and character of the realm of the dead. What had once been primarily a place of judgment and punishment became also a place of healing and growth, where souls could work through the unresolved issues of their mortal lives and prepare for whatever form of existence might await them beyond their time in the underworld. The annual cycle of Persephone's departure and return became a time of special significance in the underworld. When she left for the world above, the realm entered a period of quiet reflection and consolidation, when the changes and growth that had occurred during her presence were integrated and made permanent. Souls used this time to practice the lessons they had learned and to deepen their understanding of their own spiritual development. When Persephone returned each autumn, her arrival was celebrated with great joy and anticipation. The entire realm seemed to come alive with renewed energy and purpose, as souls who had been waiting patiently for her return gathered to welcome their queen back to her winter home. These celebrations were unlike anything that had existed in the underworld before Persephone's arrival. They were not grand spectacles designed to display power or wealth, but rather intimate gatherings that emphasized community, connection, and shared purpose. Souls would bring offerings from their own spiritual journeys, insights they had gained, wisdom they had acquired, or simply expressions of gratitude for the healing they had experienced during their time in the realm. The festivals that marked Persephone's return became opportunities for souls to share their stories and learn from one another's experiences. New arrivals to the underworld found themselves welcomed not just by Hades and his officials, but by a community of souls who understood the challenges of transition and who were eager to offer support and guidance. These gatherings helped to break down the isolation and fear that had once characterized the experience of arriving in the realm of the dead. Music played an important role in these celebrations, though it was music unlike any heard in the world above. The songs that echoed through the halls of the palace and the gardens of the underworld were composed not of notes and melodies alone, but of the harmonized experiences of countless souls. These compositions told stories of love and loss, of triumph and tragedy, of the full spectrum of mortal experience transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. The instruments that accompanied these songs were equally unique, crafted from materials that existed only in the underworld and played by souls who had discovered new forms of artistic expression in their afterlife existence. The sound they produced was hauntingly beautiful, capable of evoking deep emotions while also providing comfort and healing to those who heard it. As the seasons turned and the pattern of separation and reunion repeated year after year, both the world above and the underworld began to show the profound effects of this new arrangement. In the mortal realm, the seasonal cycle brought a deeper appreciation for the rhythms of life and death, growth and rest. Mortals learned to treasure the abundance of spring and summer while also finding meaning and purpose in the quieter months of autumn and winter. Agricultural practices evolved to work with these new seasonal patterns, with farmers learning to plant and harvest according to the rhythm of Persephone's movements between the two realms. Religious observances developed around the changing seasons, with festivals marking the return of spring and ceremonies honoring the approach of winter. These celebrations helped mortals feel connected to the greater cosmic order and gave them a sense of participation in the divine drama that played out between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The stories told about Hades and Persephone became some of the most beloved and enduring myths in mortal culture. Parents would tell their children about the beautiful maiden who became queen of the underworld, helping them understand that death was not something to be feared, but rather a natural part of the greater cycle of existence. These tales provided comfort to those who had lost loved ones, offering reassurance that the dead were not suffering, but rather were being cared for by compassionate rulers who understood both the joys and sorrows of mortal life. Temples were built in honor of both Hades and Persephone, though these were different in character from the temples dedicated to other gods. Rather than grand structures designed to inspire awe or fear, these temples were places of quiet reflection and comfort, where mortals could come to contemplate the mysteries of life and death without feeling overwhelmed or intimidated. The priests and priestesses who served in these temples were trained not only in the proper rituals and ceremonies, but also in providing counseling and support to those who were struggling with grief or fear about mortality. The agricultural festivals that celebrated Persephone's return to the world above became particularly important in mortal society. These celebrations marked not only the beginning of the growing season, but also served as reminders of the connection between the divine and mortal realms. The joy that accompanied these festivals was genuine and heartfelt, reflecting the deep gratitude that mortals felt for the return of abundance and growth to their world. In the underworld, the changes brought about by Persephone's presence continued to evolve and deepen with each passing year. The gardens she tended became increasingly diverse and beautiful, with new varieties of flowers and plants appearing that had never been seen before in any realm. These botanical marvels served not only as decoration but also as tools for healing and spiritual growth, each species possessing unique properties that could aid souls in their journey toward peace and understanding. The rivers of the underworld underwent subtle but significant transformations under Persephone's influence. While they retained their essential characteristics and purposes, they became more responsive to the individual needs of the souls who encountered them. The Styx began to reflect not just the depths of eternity, but also glimpses of the lives that souls had left behind, helping them to process their transition more effectively. The crossing became less of an ordeal and more of a meaningful ritual that honored both the life that was ending and the new existence that was beginning. The Acheron's waters grew clearer and more soothing, making it easier for souls to confront and process their sorrows without being overwhelmed by them. The river began to sing with a gentle music that provided comfort to those who wept along its banks, helping them to understand that their grief was a testament to the love they had experienced and the connections they had formed during their mortal lives. The Cocytus developed the ability to transform the tears it carried into something beautiful and healing. The flowers that grew along its banks began to bloom in colors that reflected the specific nature of each soul's grief, creating a living memorial to the losses that had shaped their earthly experience. These flowers served as reminders that even the deepest sorrow could be transformed into something meaningful and beautiful. The Phlegethon's flames became more selective and precise in their purifying work, burning away only those emotions and attachments that truly hindered a soul's growth while preserving the essential core of their being. The fire learned to distinguish between destructive anger and righteous indignation, between harmful attachment and genuine love, ensuring that the purification process enhanced rather than diminished the soul's essential nature. The Lethe's waters grew more nuanced in their effects, offering different levels of forgetfulness based on the specific needs of each soul. Some found that they needed to release only certain painful memories while retaining others that provided important lessons or connections. The river learned to accommodate these individual requirements, providing exactly the level of forgetfulness that would be most beneficial for each soul's continued growth and development. These changes in the rivers reflected a broader transformation in the entire underworld, as the realm became more responsive to the individual needs and circumstances of its inhabitants. While the fundamental principles of justice and fairness that had always characterized Hades' rule remained unchanged, the application of these principles became more flexible and personalized. The Palace of Hades expanded to accommodate the growing diversity of activities and purposes that characterized the underworld under Persephone's influence. New wings were added that housed libraries where souls could study and learn, workshops where they could develop new skills and abilities, and gathering spaces where they could form communities based on shared interests and experiences. These additions transformed the palace from a seat of government into a true center of community life. The relationship between Hades and Persephone continued to deepen and mature as they worked together to govern and improve their realm. What had begun as attraction and desire evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. They complemented each other perfectly, with Hades providing stability, wisdom, and authority while Persephone brought innovation, compassion, and the ability to see possibilities that others might miss. Their love story became a model for how relationships could grow and develop over time, showing that true love was not just about initial attraction, but about the willingness to work together toward common goals and to support each other through challenges and changes. The annual cycle of separation and reunion that they endured served to strengthen rather than weaken their bond, as each period of separation helped them appreciate what they had together, while each reunion brought new opportunities for growth and discovery. The souls who inhabited the underworld began to see Hades and Persephone as more than just rulers. They became symbols of hope and possibility, proof that even in the realm of the dead, love could flourish and relationships could bring meaning and joy to existence. Many souls found inspiration in their example, using it as motivation to work through their own emotional challenges and to seek out connections with others who shared their journey. The seasonal cycle that governed Persephone's movements between the two realms became so fundamental to the order of existence that it was impossible to imagine the world functioning any other way. The rhythm of growth and rest, abundance and reflection, became woven into the very fabric of reality, influencing not just the natural world, but also the emotional and spiritual lives of all beings, both mortal and divine. In the world above, mortals learned to structure their lives around these seasonal changes, developing traditions and practices that honored each phase of the cycle. Spring became a time for new beginnings, fresh starts, and the planting of both literal and metaphorical seeds. Summer was celebrated as a time of fulfillment and abundance, when the potential of spring came to full fruition. Autumn brought reflection and gratitude, a time to harvest not just crops, but also the lessons and experiences of the year. Winter became a season of rest and introspection, when mortals could process their experiences and prepare for the renewal that would come with the next spring. These seasonal rhythms provided mortals with a framework for understanding their own lives and the lives of those they loved. Birth and childhood were associated with spring, full of potential and rapid growth. Youth and early adulthood were linked to summer, times of energy, activity, and the flowering of individual potential. Middle age was connected to autumn, a period of harvest and reflection when the fruits of earlier efforts could be gathered and appreciated. Old age and death were associated with winter, not as endings but as times of rest and preparation for whatever form of renewal might come next. This understanding transformed the way mortals approached death and dying. Rather than seeing death as a tragic ending or a fearful unknown, many came to view it as a natural transition, similar to the seasonal changes they witnessed year after year. The knowledge that Persephone ruled the underworld alongside Hades provided additional comfort, assuring mortals that the realm of the dead was governed by rulers who understood both the joys and sorrows of mortal existence. Funeral practices evolved to reflect this new understanding, with ceremonies that celebrated the life that had been lived while also honoring the transition that was taking place. Rather than focusing solely on loss and grief, these rituals began to incorporate elements of hope and renewal, acknowledging that death was part of a larger cycle rather than simply an ending. The mystery schools that developed around the worship of Hades and Persephone taught initiates about the deeper meanings of life, death, and renewal. These teachings were not abstract philosophical concepts but practical wisdom that could be applied to daily life. Students learned to recognize the seasonal patterns in their own experiences, to embrace periods of growth and periods of rest with equal acceptance, and to see challenges and difficulties as opportunities for spiritual development rather than merely as suffering to be endured. The artistic and literary traditions that grew up around the story of Hades and Persephone produced some of the most beautiful and enduring works in mortal culture. Poets found in their tale a rich source of imagery and metaphor that could be used to explore themes of love, loss, transformation, and renewal. Musicians composed songs that captured the emotional complexity of their relationship, while visual artists created paintings and sculptures that depicted their story in ways that spoke to the hearts and imaginations of viewers. These artistic works served not only as entertainment but also as teaching tools, helping to spread the understanding and wisdom that the myth contained. Through art, the story of Hades and Persephone reached people who might never have encountered it through religious or philosophical instruction, touching their lives in ways that were immediate and personal. The influence of the myth extended beyond the realm of the arts into the practical affairs of daily life. Agricultural practices were timed to coincide with the seasonal changes associated with Persephone's movements, while legal and governmental systems began to incorporate concepts of justice and mercy that reflected the balanced approach to rule that Hades and Persephone demonstrated in their governance of the underworld. Medical practitioners began to understand health and illness in terms of seasonal and cyclical patterns, recognizing that the human body and spirit, like the natural world, went through periods of activity and rest, growth and renewal. This understanding led to more effective treatments that worked with the body's natural rhythms rather than against them. Educational systems evolved to reflect the idea that learning, like life itself, was a cyclical process that involved periods of intense growth alternating with times of consolidation and reflection. Teachers learned to structure their instruction around these natural rhythms, providing students with opportunities for both active learning and quiet contemplation. The story of Hades and Persephone also influenced the development of psychology and the understanding of human emotions. The journey through the rivers of the underworld came to be seen as a metaphor for the emotional processing that individuals needed to do in order to heal from trauma and loss. Therapists and counselors began to use concepts drawn from the myth to help their clients understand and work through their own emotional challenges. The 5 rivers, Styx, Acheron, Cocytus, Phlegethon, and Lethe, became symbols for different stages of emotional healing. The crossing of the Styx represented the acknowledgement that change was necessary and that old patterns of thinking and feeling needed to be left behind. The encounter with the Acheron symbolized the need to face and process sorrow and loss. The weeping by the Cocytus represented the importance of allowing oneself to grieve fully and completely. The purification by the Phlegethon stood for the release of anger and resentment that could prevent healing. Finally, the choice to drink or not drink from the Lethe represented the decision about what memories to retain and what to release in order to move forward. This psychological interpretation of the myth provided a powerful framework for understanding personal growth and transformation. It suggested that healing was not a simple or straightforward process, but rather a journey that involved multiple stages and required patience, courage, and self-compassion. The fact that Persephone eventually found happiness and purpose in the underworld offered hope to those who were struggling with their own dark periods, suggesting that even the most difficult circumstances could eventually lead to growth and renewal. The seasonal cycle that resulted from the compromise between the upper and lower worlds became a source of comfort and guidance for countless generations of mortals. It provided a natural rhythm that helped people understand that all things had their proper time and season, that periods of difficulty were followed by times of ease, and that endings were often the prelude to new beginnings. This understanding was particularly valuable for those who were dealing with loss and grief. The knowledge that Persephone returned to the world above each spring, bringing with her renewal and new life, provided a powerful metaphor for the idea that joy could return even after the deepest sorrow. The annual cycle offered proof that separation was not necessarily permanent, that love could endure even across the boundaries between different realms of existence. For those facing their own mortality or the death of loved ones, the story of Hades and Persephone provided reassurance that death was not the end of existence, but rather a transition to a different form of life. The depiction of the underworld as a place of growth and healing rather than punishment and suffering offered comfort to those who worried about what awaited them or their loved ones after death. The myth also provided guidance for living a meaningful life. The example of Persephone, who found purpose and fulfillment in bringing growth and healing to the realm of the dead, suggested that meaning could be found in service to others, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Her willingness to embrace her dual role as both queen of the underworld and goddess of spring showed that it was possible to honor multiple aspects of one's nature and responsibilities. The relationship between Hades and Persephone demonstrated that love could grow and deepen over time, even when it began under difficult circumstances. Their story showed that genuine partnership was based not on possession or control, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the willingness to work together toward common goals. The annual cycle of separation and reunion that they endured served as a reminder that relationships required effort and commitment, but that the rewards of such dedication could be profound and lasting. The transformation of the underworld under Persephone's influence illustrated the power of bringing different perspectives and approaches together in pursuit of common goals. The realm became more compassionate and responsive to individual needs without losing its essential commitment to justice and order. This example provided a model for how institutions and communities could evolve and improve while maintaining their core values and purposes. The rivers of the underworld, with their various properties and purposes, offered insight into the complexity of human emotion and the process of psychological healing. They showed that different types of pain required different approaches to resolution, and that healing was not a simple matter of forgetting or moving on, but rather a complex process that involved acknowledgement, processing, purification, and conscious choice about what to retain and what to release. The gardens that flourished under Persephone's care in the underworld became symbols of the idea that beauty and growth were possible even in the darkest circumstances. They demonstrated that nurturing and care could transform any environment, no matter how unpromising it might initially appear. The flowers and plants that bloomed in the eternal twilight of the realm of the dead showed that life could take many different forms, and that beauty was not dependent on conventional conditions or expectations. The Palace of Hades, with its expansion and transformation under Persephone's influence, illustrated how spaces could evolve to meet the changing needs of their inhabitants. The addition of libraries, workshops, and community gathering spaces showed the importance of providing opportunities for learning, creativity, and social connection in any healthy community. The festivals and celebrations that marked Persephone's annual return to the underworld demonstrated the power of ritual and ceremony to create meaning and build community. These gatherings showed how shared experiences could bring people together and help them feel part of something larger than themselves. The music and art that accompanied these celebrations illustrated how creative expression could transform individual experiences into something that could be shared and appreciated by others. The mystery schools and religious practices that developed around the worship of Hades and Persephone showed how spiritual teachings could provide practical guidance for daily life. These traditions demonstrated that wisdom and understanding were not abstract concepts but living truths that could be applied to the challenges and opportunities that people encountered in their everyday experiences. The artistic and literary works inspired by the myth showed how stories could transcend their original context to become sources of meaning and inspiration for people across different cultures and time periods. The enduring appeal of the tale of Hades and Persephone demonstrated that certain themes and truths were universal in their relevance and power. As the cycles of seasons continued to turn year after year, century after century, the story of Hades and Persephone became woven into the very fabric of existence. It provided a framework for understanding the rhythms of life and death, growth and rest, separation and reunion that governed all aspects of existence. The myth offered comfort to the grieving, hope to the despairing, and guidance to those seeking to understand their place in the larger cosmic order. The realm of the dead, transformed by love and partnership, became a place that mortals could contemplate without fear or despair. The knowledge that it was ruled by compassionate and just sovereigns who understood both the joys and sorrows of mortal existence provided reassurance that death was not an ending but a transition to a different form of meaningful existence. The world above, blessed by the seasonal cycle that brought regular renewal and rest, developed a deeper appreciation for the rhythms and patterns that governed natural life. Mortals learned to live in harmony with these cycles, finding meaning and purpose in each season and understanding their own lives as part of a larger pattern of growth, fulfillment, rest, and renewal. In the end, the story of Hades and Persephone became more than just a myth or a religious teaching. It became a way of understanding existence itself, a framework for making sense of the complexities and contradictions of life, death, love, loss, and renewal. Through their example, mortals learned that even the darkest circumstances could be transformed by love, patience, and the willingness to work together toward a common good. The rivers continued to flow through the underworld, carrying their ancient purposes while adapting to the changing needs of the souls they served. The gardens continued to bloom in the eternal twilight, their beauty a testament to the power of nurturing care. The palace continued to expand and evolve, providing space for community, learning, and growth. And through it all, Hades and Persephone continued their eternal dance of separation and reunion, their love serving as the foundation for the seasonal cycle that brought meaning and rhythm to existence in both the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Their story, like the rivers that flow through their domain, continues to carry its truths and wisdom forward through time, offering guidance and comfort to all who encounter it, reminding them that love can transform even the darkest places, that growth is possible even in the most unlikely circumstances, and that the cycles of life and death, separation and reunion, are not obstacles to be overcome but natural rhythms to be embraced and honored.